Thanks everybody for joining today. Looking forward to a great discussion on something that's, I think, critically important that we're all wrestling with right now, which is how to find good people and how to keep them and how to keep them happy. So it's going to be a great discussion today. I am Joe Montgomery, founder of Group Up, which is a coaching organization and community for accounting firm leaders. Also own Cohesion Accounting, a virtual CPA advisory-based practice, and I'm a former partner of Montgomery & Company CPAs. So our vision is we want to see accounting leaders rise up like we never have before, better nurture and coach our own teams, better proactively guide our clients through high value advisory. And by doing those two things, find tremendous personal freedom. I think that's what it's about and what we're after. Ryan, could you just tell the group a little bit about yourself?
Hey, thanks, Joe. Looking forward to the discussion with you as well. This is what I live, the recruit side of this, and I certainly hear from plenty of my clients about the retention side. So quick background, I'm actually a trained accountant, so accounting degree, worked in the Big Four for a few years, got my CPA, did a number of years of various industry jobs in finance and accounting. Along the way, I was recruited several times to make different job changes, and most of those experiences were not all that awesome. So that, I would say, is probably part of the seed of why I do what I do now. So about 5 years ago, I launched out into the recruiting career and have owned my own firm for a little over 4 years. Now have a small team, so I've actually hired for my own team and know some of the challenges you all go through as well. My practice is focused on CPA firms, most of them small and mid-sized firms. So pretty familiar with what I would imagine most of you are here for. So anyway, that's a little bit about my background.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. Good to have you today. So I think before we kind of start, and I promise this is the ugliest slide of the whole presentation, don't love a lot of text, but we're accountants and we like data. So here we go. So this is what's at stake, right? On the left-hand side, you'll notice a lot of the reasons that people are not really satisfied where they're at. And so causes of why people are looking for something different. You'll see some themes like pay, opportunity, not a lot of opportunity, not a lot of flexibility, and issues with childcare, and just working too much. So I think it's probably what we know intuitively. But then on the other side, it's interesting to note that 62% of professionals actually lose interest in a job position if they don't hear back from the employer within 2 weeks. And then that actually goes up to 2/3 or 77% if there's no answer or no reply within 3 weeks. So that tells me people aren't super satisfied, and we also have a shorter window than maybe I think we'd like to think. I think it's easy to say, oh yeah, this takes a month or two, and but if we really want to find the great people, we don't have a whole lot of time. At the same time, recent survey indicated that I find this last part of the stat particularly interesting. 30% of these respondees said that if the employer did not provide some kind of flexible work arrangement, they were likely or very likely to switch jobs. And so that's kind of state of the workforce in a broad stroke. There's tons of data on this. But then if we look at more in-house data like AICPA, we know that 75% of members are becoming eligible to retire. We also see a decline in accounting, bachelor's degree enrollments. And then I didn't put this on the screen, but there's data that we found that indicate people sitting for the CPA exam have dropped by a net 10% over the past year or so. Couple that with low unemployment and just that turnover costs a lot of money. We all know that. Some estimates say 33 to 66%. We think this is a big deal, and we want to help you get it right. All right, let's keep going. And so I love this quote. Ryan, I'll kind of turn it over to you. We're going to take some turns and jump back and forth today, a little conversational. Feel free to lob questions in the question section as well. We will probably hold questions until the end, and we'll make sure we have 10-15 minutes to get to those, just because of the size of the group today. But Ryan, flesh out this quote a little bit more, and then I'd also just, as you're out there talking with candidates and talking with firm owners, and seeing everybody change and shift and adapt, like, how crazy is it? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so it absolutely is, and I'm sure most people didn't log on to hear a recruiter tell them they need to pay people more money as the way to solve their recruiting troubles. I promise I will add a little bit more than that, but that is kind of undeniable that's part of the equation. So some of the things, there's a good portion of our audience is with some of the larger firms. So I'm starting to see things like retention bonuses to hold on to people through, you know, a busy season or two. Certainly the recruiting equivalent of that is sign-on bonuses with some, you know, period that's tied to being able to fully earn that sign-on bonus. The raises and percentage increases in salaries for particularly folks on the earlier career side of things is a little bit mind-blowing when you do the percentage analysis. I've seen people go from, you know, 55 to 60,000 in their first position to getting promotions into the 70s, well into the 70s, or somebody that's at 70 getting 95. And again, when you do the percentages, those are big numbers. So it's undeniable. The Pew Research poll on the previous slide is, you know, the number one reason is that, you know, people are quitting is that they feel they're not compensated. You kind of combine that with the fact that literally everyone is hearing constantly, this market is hot. You know, they're hearing what their colleagues are getting in terms of pay increases, or at least they have some general perception. People have FOMO when it comes to that. And so you can find any number of sources that talk about, you know, how many people are looking to leave. And I have seen anywhere from like 30 to 60% on that number, that in the next year, X number of, or X percentage of people are really looking to make a move. And that's probably a big driver. But let's dig a little bit under that top line, the headline number, and talk about really what I hear from people when we're having these conversations about why they want to make a move. So on this slide here, you have, I like to think of it a little bit of like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs type of a scenario. So on the left here, you've got motivators, and at some level, you're not going to get away from money being a very important thing. Like, all the things above it are also important, but if a person does not have that level of financial security with their compensation, it's going to be the overriding factor. And so that's where a lot of people are, actually. So that's why you see, hey, money, you know, people are seeing their prices increase in everything with inflation running like it has been. It's top of mind for everyone. So getting beyond that, really, what gives people, you know, fulfillment in their job? So this touches on what Joe's going to talk about, and what is going to attract them to a new place of work. So feeling like they have a sense of competency or mastery over what they're doing, that's a big motivator. People need to know they're doing well in their job, and that yeah, they have the opportunity to develop those skills. Inspiration and purpose. Not everybody is like the business owner and having this big individual mission and purpose, but people love to join mission-driven, purpose-driven organizations because they adapt that as their own. Autonomy. Boy, how many stories do I hear of incredible micromanagement that infringes on people saying, I'm a professional, I've got all this training, and yet I'm micromanaged and I'm not trusted to do the job that I've been hired to do. People want that. They want to have agency over their work. They want to have opportunity to make a difference in their work. Achievement, recognition, and I'm not going to beat a dead horse. Everybody knows this. People need to get the pat on the back. They need to be recognized when they put in the extra effort. And then there's certainly community. Community is a big element for people. Whether they're remote or in person, people need to have that sense of community. So I won't go through every one of those demotivators, but you look at the number one reason in that Pew Research poll of people leaving, well, the number one reason is like this fundamental motivator, and it's the top reason people are citing for why they're making a move. But there are others, and some of the ones on that list illustrate that. So take the polar opposite of all these other motivators, and those are demotivators. So what do we do? Where do we go from here? Joe, can you take that next slide? And feel free, Joe, to let me know. I know we have another polling question about the hiring, what people are thinking in terms of hiring. But so this is where we're gonna the practical elements that go beyond just pay people more, and that aren't, you probably also don't want a recruiter to tell you need to hire a recruiter. So these are my keys to success. I hope you appreciate the pun there. These are all going to start with an E, but we have to address those motivators that we just talked about. Like, we have to be able to give people those things, and a lot of these don't cost you money, okay? They do take intentionality. So let's look at some of these E's here. So the first one, establish your purpose. So we're talking largely to people who are working in CPA firms. I don't want to push this further than it is, but CPA firms largely do the same thing. So the fact that you do bookkeeping services, the fact that you do tax returns, the fact that you do audit, compilation, whatever, that's not unique. It's not a differentiator. People know pretty well when you give them a job title what the actual work is going to do. So how do we go beyond that? What are people looking for? Well, why do you do this? What is your purpose in providing this service? I've got a personal story in my business for why I went into recruitment. I didn't go into the detail, but my very first recruiting experience, man, I dealt with a really pushy, salesy recruiter once I got a job offer on the table. And I just that to me influenced me in a big way to say, I wanted to provide this service to people without that pressure, because I realized people are making pretty big life decisions when they go into a job change situation. So what is your why? Why are you doing the work you're doing in your firm? And if you can provide that for your people, give them that direction, it's going to differentiate you in a service that does not offer a lot of differentiation. It's also going to provide you that North Star and your folks. Where are you going as a firm, and what are you trying to accomplish? I have a client, Joe, be familiar with this one, something that around, we want to help people make money and do, I forget what it is. Joe could probably remember the tagline on that one.
More time, freedom, and money to do what you love.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So what is that guiding star, and how does that infuse what you're doing? So that's the point on establish your purpose. So after you've established your purpose, the next thing is to be able to explain your story. So this is, everybody has a unique story as a firm. There's a lot of mergers and acquisitions going on, so some of that might get lost in there. But what is the current story of your firm? What can people connect with? And storytelling is such a vital thing. It's what we as humans, we connect with stories. We don't connect with job descriptions, okay? So what is the story of your firm, and how can you infuse that in your hiring process, okay? So ways you can get your story out there, you gotta have, that usually we're gonna have something on our About Us page on a website, but make sure that's also, some portion of that is reflected if you're gonna post a job ad, for instance. Get that in your job ad. What is your story? Your purpose can go there too. All of those things help you differentiate for, when you're trying to find your next tax manager or senior auditor or bookkeeper or whatever it is you might be looking for. Explain your story and get it out there, website, social media, and infuse it in your hiring process. So like I said, the job description is a place. Make sure people have an opportunity to hear about that directly from anyone involved in your hiring process. That's how you get that story out there, and that's how you establish a deeper connection beyond going back to our initial quote. The money isn't everything. It's important, but it's not everything. And so these are some of the other things you can do to help with your process. Our next one, embracing your culture. Now, some of those may seem a little difficult to distinguish, but spend the time on them because these three, they are distinct. So what is your culture? You need to really embrace the culture and in the sense, own it, because the best thing you can do in the hiring process is to get a very strong reaction from anybody you're interacting with. The worst thing is to get yeah, I might be able to work there. They get a vague sense of it, but you want a strong yes or a strong no, because those things are, anything in between is wasting people's time. That's what leads to some of the issues probably of retention in some sense that Joe might talk about. But really you're wasting time if you're really not getting a strong reaction on people. And so culture, birds of a feather flock together, that type of a scenario. Your people, your team, you want them to work together really well. So infuse your culture in, again, your attraction process. It should be evident in the way you write a job ad. It should be evident in every person that your candidates talk to throughout the interview process. Can't get past this next one. You must look at enhancing your offer, okay? So my first comment here is put up or be prepared to wait, okay? It might take a long time if you're not gonna be competitive on your offer, okay? Now, does that mean only dollars? No, it absolutely doesn't. You can try the perks. Client I'm working with now, they've got some perks as far as Audible membership for their employees, membership for that the Calm app for meditation. Is anybody going to make a decision on the basis of having a $5 or $10 a month app paid for them? No, they won't. But if those type of things, like you talk about, work-life balance is important for your firm, well, that very small perk communicates something about that. So where you can, enhance your offer. Flexibility is probably one of the most important factors today. I would tie that to a kind of a core need in terms of autonomy that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation. People need to have the flexibility to deal with life, because life happens all the time, including during 8 to 5 for most people. So they need to have the flexibility to accomplish the job they've been charged with in a way that really works with life, because it does happen. So flexibility is basically non-negotiable. Also on that Pew Research poll, growth. People need to be able to grow in the role that they're taking on. And the more you can show examples of that, like if you have people in your interview process who have been promoted, that is about as good as it comes. There's your social proof that's going to be really good. Expand your pool. So I can't tell you how often I hear about remote versus not remote. And this can touch on any number of areas. Compensation is covered, your benefits are covered, flexibility, culture, all those things. So everything you can do, think of it as, the piece of the pie, okay? So as you define your criteria for a job, you are constraining the pool of everyone who could be a candidate for your company. So there's not a right or wrong answer in terms of remote versus on-premise or hybrid. There's not. It's whatever the right answer is for you. You just have to understand that if you put geography as a constraint, you're severely limiting your pool. If you take geography off, then you really open up the possibilities in terms of your candidate pool. And you can go down every other list of benefits and whatever. Like if you don't offer a certain benefit, well, that's going to exclude a portion of the population, the candidate population that could be a fit, but they can't because of your benefits. So think about that in terms of how you're approaching your job search. Every constraint you put on it limits your pool, in addition to, of course, what time you're looking. So there's a good bit there. If you can go outside the box and start thinking beyond what other people, it's got to have a bachelor's degree, you got to have whatever the other check marks are. If you can go beyond that to think for people who are demonstrating that they're capable of learning and mastery, and you've got the bandwidth in your business to accommodate that, all the better, because that's kind of a blue ocean approach. Not everybody's going that way, so you have the people available to you if you can kind of think outside the box in those ways. All right, and then the last one here, so that probably seems obvious, but execute your process. I do see a lot of inconsistency in the clients I've worked with, and I really do try to coach people to help them drive a consistent process. I also see so much of this is the way we've always done it, and they don't know why they do a certain thing in their interview process. They don't know what to ask in the interview process. People aren't really prepared for it. So be thoughtful, be consistent, have a plan going into your recruitment process, your interview process. Know exactly what it is you're looking for and when you've found it. I've got a link we'll send out to everyone following the webinar here, kind of a quick guide on here's things you can do to improve your hiring process. Like consider implementing, I think there's 6 things that we've got in that handout for you. Drop in your email through that link and we'll send you that document, which are, it's not, you don't have to do everything. If you did, it would certainly help, but there is a little bit of a challenge in doing some of that. So change one thing in your process and see if you don't get better results in your recruitment. That's what I got on the recruitment side, Joe.
Good. Ryan, I mean, if I may, it really sounds like being super clear about who we are as a firm. And then even if we can't offer everything and anything under the sun, right? Because some of our budgets maybe wouldn't allow that. Although I think we could typically do more than we think. It sounds like so much of this is about just being who we are and being super clear about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I see, I battle this a little bit on the candidate side because candidates tend to get so focused on a performance. Like I have to say the right thing, I have to do the right thing in the interview process, and they may forget during that time to actually evaluate whether a given opportunity is the right fit for them. We can do the same thing on the hiring side, where we've got a conception that doesn't line up with reality, and we're like, well, what do we have to say? What are the benefits we have to offer? And those questions tend to indicate we're not kind of in line. You know, it's like, what can we offer that's consistent with our benefits and values? And the more you embrace exactly who you are as a firm, as a company, the better result you're going to have, because it's going to be apparent to people whether that's a fit for them. And don't, even if, like, let's do a caricature, even if you were on an extreme side and you said, we are a super traditional firm, we do the same thing every time, we don't have any of those great perks, we're just stable, steady state, whatever, there are people out there who are interested in that, and that will appeal to. And I think that's a dwindling number in this extreme case. But, you know, if that's who you are, you need to embrace that so that you can find the person that's going to be really comfortable in the environment that says, we haven't changed our technology in 20 years, and I love knowing exactly what I'm going to do every day for the next 20 years. That's a silly example, but yeah, absolutely embrace who you are.
Yeah, I think that's great. I can speak out of experience on this with the purpose, story, and culture. We used to do a good chunk of our interviews, not necessarily a bunch of questions like the stereotypical, here's the 20 questions we're going to ask the candidate, but more like, hey, we're just going to share who we are a lot. And we use half the time for that. And then we would just try to elicit questions from them, from the candidate, about what do they want to know that they don't, about our company, about who we are. So just speaking from personal experience, it definitely works.
Absolutely. Yep.
So we've kind of talked about the attract and recruit portion of this. We're going to shift over to retention. How do we keep these people engaged once they get in the door? So on the retention side, yeah, 5 things that I've found in my own firms, the firms that I coach, that really make a big difference. So I think number 1 is we all want to be heard. We all want to have a space to share our ideas, our frustrations, our concerns, and our dreams. And you can be that for your people to an extent. But, the annual performance review is completely dead. I think it died a couple of years ago. I'm sure some of you are checking in with your people once a quarter. That's good. I'm a strong proponent that everybody in the firm, and I'm sure some will disagree, and that's fine, should have some kind of a check-in with a leader in your firm at least once a month. And it should be a similar process throughout, but we have to create a safe feedback loop. And that's a great way that I've seen firms pull that off. 3 questions that I personally use with any employee, any teammate. Number 1, what are you most excited about? What are you looking forward to doing this month, this quarter? Number 2, what are you most frustrated with? Where are you stuck? What's most discouraging to you these days? Number 3, what can the firm do to better support you? How can we invest in you and in your role to make you and the firm more successful? Like, see what ideas they have. I've had great ideas come out of conversations like this. I've also had employees say, I'm burnout, I don't want to be on the leadership team, and they're really embarrassed about it. But yet, because we've had this monthly cadence with them, they feel it's safe to speak up. And rather than just leave the firm because they feel like they're not performing well or whatever, and they just self-quit, they actually were able to adjust within the firm and just find a different seat. So we'll talk about the goal and the metric check in a little bit, but it's a good chance to set a next step. Like, you want to leave this meeting with, okay, what are each of us going to do over the next 30 days to help the company, help each other? Like, it's a very casual, you can do this over coffee, over Zoom, over lunch. Doesn't have to be more than 30 minutes. I would schedule an hour just in case. But in my mind, it's a must do for creating a feedback loop. The other thing that I've seen firms do super well is a weekly health survey. Saw a lot of firms do this in the pandemic, where they would actually send out a survey every single week to their entire office. 1 question, scale of 0 to 10, 0 being it was terrible, 10 being it was fantastic. Rate your work week last week. And I've had firms get ahead of people quitting because we had this information proactively. So the feedback loop is super important. This is, we don't hire machines, right? We don't, we're not a manufacturing plant. The biggest number on our P&L is payroll. Flawed people who change every day, who have needs and emotions, and this creates a space to take care of them. This goes very well, almost 2 sides of the same coin with what Ryan, you were saying. But a key part of actually keeping people, it's really good if we're clear about who we are when they're deciding to work with us initially. But if we fail, if we flop, if we just become this, yeah, we hope we grow, we hope we have clients, yeah, tax season's going to happen, and yeah, we hope we work less, and I think we're going to hire some people maybe this year, but there's no direction, there's no vision, there's no purpose, there's no heartbeat of your firm. Then even if you do a good job getting them in the door, you're going to lose people on the back end. And so at Group Up, we actually teach firms how to do a process. And we call it making a vision map, which is something you can have on a TV monitor playing. This is reviewed regularly, so once a quarter with the entire team. There's a process of establishing a leadership team and working together once a quarter to establish quarterly goals for the next quarter. And it sounds kind of silly, but just having one sentence with a strong visual behind it. So here's an example. I think we mentioned this earlier, but this was Montgomery and Company's vision, was to give people more time, money, and freedom to do what they love. It's like, yeah, I want that. We want that for our clients. We want that for our team. Like, we would talk about that often, and we talk about our values often. So I'd encourage too, something you can do in your team meetings or in this quarterly vision casting. It's like, let's just talk about community. Let's tell some stories of how we were able to show community to our clients, or what our clients were doing in the community. Like, let's talk about that. Super, super important. These are ways you can make that happen. So I don't know, this is kind of a long description, but results-based adaptive compensation. I'm trying to say two things. I'm trying to say it should be based on results, not inputs or time, and it should be a little more flexible or creative than I think we've done it in the past. So I think the traditional world is, are you part-time or full-time, right? Do you want to come to the office or be remote? Are you a contractor or are you an employee? Like, but I think the truth is there's actually a scale, a sliding scale, where you have people go on maternity leave and make different decisions about their working life post baby. Like, that's a real thing that happens. And so if you wish to retain sometimes some excellent people, like, maybe it's not 20 or 40 hours, maybe it's 25 or 30. Maybe intuitive and common sense, but I've seen, in at least the coaching I've done, a lot of firms just limit things and limit people to boxes. I think the critical thing is establish what the company requirements are, what the company needs are to operate as a business, and then build a specific path collaborating with your people to keep them happy. So that's something I'm seeing a lot of people do. In my opinion, it must include some kind of remote work, flexible option. Doesn't have to be, yeah, you can work anywhere, anytime, and we don't track time. It doesn't have to be that, although I've seen a lot of that, right? It can be, we want you here 4 days a week, but you pick a floating day and you get it. As long, I think, as you're doing something or trying there. I've seen other firms say, no, you do have to be in the office every week, but you don't have to work 40 hours. You can do a minimum of 20 hours, but you have to get your work done. And so again, results-based. So I think if we don't start to consider those things, we're going to fall behind the times a little bit and maybe fail to attract and retain some of our great people. Number 4 is setting clear and reasonable expectations. And so this little chart or visual on the screen is a weekly scorecard. And actually, this one's a monthly one. So I firmly believe every employee needs to have 1 to 3 measurables that determine the success in their specific role in your firm, measured by a couple numbers. Now, this is for a bookkeeper, this one on the screen, but you can do this for an administrative assistant. You can do this for a sales associate. They're just different numbers, right? I don't recommend having all 5 of these. These are just examples of what I've seen in multiple firms. And we review these once a month. And then number 5, deal with the elephants. So I think we all know what it's like to be in a tense meeting, and there's obviously an elephant in the room that needs to be addressed, and nobody wants to talk about it. In my own firm, we had an employee stay for 16 years. Too long. They were a toxic employee. We even had a client come up to my dad and I, because we were business partners at the time, and just tell us to our face, yeah, that person is a snake. And yet we let this person exist within our culture for 16 years. We finally dealt with it and we shifted things over time. But your best people are looking at this. They're watching us as leaders. to see what we're going to allow, what we're going to tolerate. Unlike this little Canva elephant that I found, these issues are not cute. And we must eliminate them. We must work through them together as a team, or we will lose people. They'll lose confidence in us, in our ability to handle these conversations, and they'll ultimately leave. And so those are just
Ben, with a question for you on that. So, you know, if you look at all those points, none of those are get better at doing a tax return or get better at producing a financial statement, which most people who go through, who are accountants, they develop this very technical career path. And then we get into a management position, or maybe we've started our own firm. And you've got none of those skills help with most of these things. So a safe feedback loop, that's communication. Compelling vision and purpose, that's a little bit of strategy, but then being able to communicate it. Clear, reasonable expectations, communication. Deal with elephants quickly and kindly, communication. How can people who don't have this as their primary training, what can they do, or what have you seen people do to be able to develop in these areas?
It takes a lot of work. There's no silver bullet. So yeah, Ryan and I don't pretend to jump on here and say, do these 3 things and all the problems will be solved. It has taken, I'm not perfect. None of us are perfect. I'm better than I was 2 years ago, 10 years ago. But it has taken 10 years for me to learn some of these things in my own companies. It takes a lot of time. And it took us as a firm back at Montgomery & Company a good 4 years to really hone in on some of these things and practice them well. We had several periods where we flopped. I think we like to get things right as accountants, and getting it right with people stuff is very up in the air. I think getting it right is simply scheduling the meetings with your team. So start with those monthly one-on-ones. Just start with, I don't want to say forcing a dialogue, but create the space for it. Get them on the calendar. Ask those 3 questions and just kind of watch what happens. It's a process. If we can just think of it as a process, that getting it right is sort of a completion grade, and then following the process. Over the years, you will grow as a leader with the questions that you ask and the intuition and the pushing and the soft stuff, right? But it's definitely a better one day at a time thing from what I've seen.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, and this is pulling a little bit from my career prior to recruitment, but also with firm owners that I've worked with. There's certainly an awareness that kind of has to be there that, like, hey, this isn't your key competence to start with. So how do you go about developing it? Kind of like the first thing is to know that you've got a problem in a way, and to be able to seek the help. There's some great literature resources out there in terms of how to do a lot of these things, how to do them well. You know, having the crucial conversations is kind of a legendary business book that can help with some of this communication. But yeah, seeking out the help, and I think it applies to people. You know, Joe and I primarily work with firm owners. Joe gets down in the weeds with some of the staff as well. I certainly talk to those people, but you know, this does apply most people in this industry are going to look at some kind of management responsibility at some point. Most places don't do a great job of preparing you for those elements, all of these soft skills that have to come into play. So seek out that the training and development in those areas for sure.
That's right. And we had a coach, we had a business coach. We've had actually several. I have a coach now I own 3 businesses today. So I have a coach. I coach firms, group up coaches. We do group coaching and one-on-one, and we have a community with resources to help you kind of plug and play. A great book that I love is called Dream Manager. I'm sure some have heard of it, but it's all about helping people achieve their goals and helping mentor. And I find too that one of the biggest mistakes that firm leaders make in particular, because we're really smart, right? We like to solve the problem kind of on our own, is leaving out the team member on this stuff, and failing to establish these things collaboratively together. That's a huge thing I see. And so, yeah, this is how you can get help. Ryan and I are here. There's our emails. There's a link to OpenFirm. Encourage you to check that out. I also have a white paper on why are we losing good people that I'll send out after this. And so let's go ahead and see if we can hit some questions. All right.
I'm not seeing a whole lot of questions in the chat, but some comments were coming in. Someone said we do weekly one-on-ones in accounting at Hertz.
Weekly one-on-ones. There you
Yeah.
go.
And
And then there was
that
go
have
ahead,
some,
Ryan.
yeah, there's probably some folks that are in environments where maybe it's an aspirational thing that actually never happens. So they don't have any kind of formal process. But I think most of us kind of live and die by our calendars, and a recurring meeting monthly, quarterly, or annually is not that hard to put on our calendar. So take that easy step to make that happen for sure.
And it goes without saying, because we have a lot of 50 employee and over firms on the webinar today, that's not necessarily you, the owner, having that conversation, just somebody in the leadership whom you trust.
Yep. I saw a question from, or not, a comment from Monica. She's in a different environment, manufacturing, where I know that world well. That's where most of my career was in manufacturing prior to recruitment. Yeah, there's some practical things that make that very difficult to have quite the flexibility that some other positions may afford. And I would say there's always something you can do in terms of flexibility. Many even manufacturing companies, I guess a lot of them got the designation during COVID that they were critical, so they could still go to work. But most companies have to figure out ways, if there's some big natural disaster, whatever, to be able to continue to work. So there usually are some ways we can pursue some flexibility. It will not look different. It will not look the same for every type of role. So I would say to lean into those conversations internally, because I know even in CPA firms, like if you've got a reception type person at the front, it's pretty hard to offer that person they can show up whenever they want. So, you know, what does flexibility look like with that person? And don't be afraid to have the conversation that is going to look different than other people in your firm.
Somebody's saying at my firm, we're currently in a razor thin position. This person's at staff level, with most of the staff that joined within a year quitting or being laid off within that period, which stacks more of the compliance, correspondence audits onto the longer term staff, causing gradual burnout. Yeah, sounds familiar. We had 80% turnover in one of the firms I've worked in over a 1.5 year period, and it was terrible. Some of this may speak more to business model. Something else we're firm believers in at Group Up is right service to right client for the right price. And so I wonder if some of that's going on, where maybe there's, and maybe it's not, but if we have high value work for ideal clients within our scope that we're good at providing to clients, it often equals lower burnout too. And yeah, it'd be interesting to talk with you. I think, is it Tomer? Be interesting to talk maybe afterwards about what sounds like there's a lot going on.
There's some good questions down further in the discussion there. So Trevor asks about, are there any suggestions as to how, you know, small and mid-sized firms can compete with the Big Four for talent? Just trying to get quick answers here. I would say you're not. Don't try. You're not competing for the same person. Anecdotally, literally today, I was talking with someone who's in a mid-size, I would say, firm that, you know, we were talking about that Big Four element, and he's, you know, I was telling him about some of the stuff I had heard about busy season, and he said, if I was in that environment, I would be gone. There's no way I would be in that environment. So the Big Four is going to appeal to a certain type of person. that's where we talked about earlier, you have to embrace who you are, because there are people who the Big Four is not right for. So you got to find the people who are right for you. So don't focus so much on how to compete with them. Yeah, in a practical way, don't have your people work 70 or 80 hours a week for long stretches of time, and that's probably a big selling point. Jessica has a question on what's your feelings on offering unlimited PTO. Joe, you may have feedback on this. I'm struggling with that in my own business because I kind of want to offer flexibility like that. But then you read most of the stuff I've ever read about that says people with an unlimited PTO policy take less vacation than others. So I've got a client that uses a responsible PTO policy. So I think there's some things that need to be specified to give people something where they feel comfortable to take the time off. And you just you figure out how to make that work for your business. Joe, you may have more detail on that one.
Just as a point of feedback, in our little baby firm with a very small amount of clients, we do offer unlimited PTO, but the work has to be done, and we track that rigorously. Percentage of projects completed on time. If they are, sure. We don't care where people are or when they're working. It's an experiment, though. We'll see.
Jono, sorry if I got that wrong. Had some positive feedback for us, appreciate that, but then says, how can I tactfully convince two partners to start taking these things seriously? That's either kind of a head in the sand type of a scenario. Everything, generational change is happening in the workforce. Studies saying millennials and Gen Z would rather be unemployed than have to work in a place that interferes with their personal life. So the priorities are shifting. They are not the same as they've always been. So yeah, they're going to be confronted with it because they're going to not have the people that they need to do. So if you can't get that change internally, seek it out, because there are places that are doing these things well. It's not that everybody's doing these things wrong. So you can seek those out.
I love Sherry's comment that the owner calls everybody on their birthday, and there's 1,000 employees, is what it sounds like, and he doesn't miss a day. That's incredible. Like, I mean, a lot of time, but I bet it's creating some good loyalty to the firm.
Mm-hmm. Somebody's got a kind of practical question, Darius. What's the average time for recruiting candidates to be placed? I can't speak for everybody. When candidates decide they're going to make a move, I am seeing people be very active so that I'm competing with my client versus several other people simultaneously. So when that person decides to make a move, they can move very quickly. Our own process, when we do a dedicated engaged search with a firm, we have about a 2-week process on the front end to produce results typically. Now that's all of our outreach and everything. That's just to get the first person in front of our client. Realistically, you have to prepare for about a month process. And if you're looking for something in high demand, seniors and managers are in crazy high demand. Everybody wants them, including everybody outside of public accounting. You could be waiting a while if you're not going to be able to have a competitive offer.
Joe and Ryan, we are just about out of time. If there's any final thoughts you want to share before I wrap us up for today.
Yeah, getting your people right is super important. Say, grab 1 or 2 things from this webinar and start practicing them. And thanks for joining, everybody.
Yeah, there's some great questions out there. Please do reach out to us. We'll be happy to help and not just sell our services. And we both have handouts that'll be kind of coming your way to try to give you some concrete things to help you. So thanks for attending.